What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today I'll be bringing you the top streamers entering week 2 of fantasy football. Guys that if you skipped out on the quarterback position early, the tight end position early, and defenses early in your draft, you guys can put into your lineup and expect some big production from going into week 2 of fantasy football. But before we get into the video, as always, let's hit the intro. All right, so before I bring you the top streamers entering week 2 of fantasy football, I want to give a quick shout out to Establish the Run. Establish the Run creates high quality DFS and prop betting content. The founders, Adam Levitan and Evan Silva, are longtime fantasy experts that myself and Corey have followed for many years and can personally vouch for as being legit. If you guys play DFS, these are the most serious DFS guys around. They have a team of people, including Adam Levitan, Evan Silva, and Michael Leone, creating weekly projections, ownership projections, and even analyzing things like offensive and defensive line matchups each week to help you in weekly tournaments as well as your season-long leagues. You guys can use promo code FSC for 10% off any package they have to offer. DFS packages, player props packages, and in-season packages, all 10% off with promo code FSC. They also have free content available on their Establish the Run YouTube channel. We appreciate the support from the whole team over at Establish the Run for us over here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange. And now let's get into the top streamers for week 2 of fantasy football. And before we get into quarterback position, I briefly want to mention that Carson Wentz would be on this video, but we kind of went in depth on him on the waiver show. This is a guy that I think could potentially be a long-term pickup season long, given the outlook we saw from that Washington offense, the volume that we can expect long-term, and how Carson looked in his own right. So he would be on this list, but we're talking more so short-term. I think that he can be a long-term top 15 quarterback option for you for the rest of the season. But talking about the quarterbacks this week, Matt Ryan kicks us off, quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, going on the road to play the same defense that Carson Wentz teared up with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Matt Ryan's currently rostered in 43% of Yahoo leagues, and with the Jaguars, their secondary had their fair share of hiccups going against the Commanders this past week. And while I expect JT to have a monster game, as JT is probably the best running back in the NFL at this current point, I do also think that Matt Ryan in this Colts passing game should be able to dissect that weak Jaguars secondary. We saw this past week, Matt Ryan was able to throw 50 passing attempts. Yes, overtime was an effect there, but even if he's at about that 30 to 35 type of mark against that secondary, I think he can have a very solid performance from a fantasy perspective. Number 2 on the list is going to be Marcus Mariota, quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, going on the road to play the Los Angeles Rams. He's currently rostered in 9% of leagues according to Yahoo Fantasy. And with Marcus Mariota, clearly there could be a potential tough game script on paper against a Rams defense that's poised to bounce back after that Thursday night football showing. But with Mariota, we're leaning on that rushing volume ceiling that he showed in week 1. He had 12 rushing attempts, along with how good that young receiving core looked in week 1 with Drake London and Kyle Pitts in particular. I think that Mariota gives you a safe floor with his rushing projection with a potential ceiling given the likes of Drake London and Kyle Pitts performing against that Rams defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed. Number 3 is going to be Jameis Winston, quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, going to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home, rostered in 46% of Yahoo leagues. And we saw this past week with the New Orleans Saints, they were about league average 14th in terms of neutral game script passing rate in week 1 against Atlanta. And obviously Tampa Bay is a much tougher defense, but we've seen in the past that the Saints play very well against Tampa Bay. And while there's no rushing upside with Winston, we can see a potential elite receiving core emerge, given the fact that Michael Thomas looked like his old self. Jarvis Landry really developed into his role on that team, and Chris Olave showed flashes in week 1. Given that receiving core, given how well the offensive line played in week 1, I expect Winston to build off an impressive week 1 performance that he showed against the Atlanta Falcons this week against Tampa Bay. Going on to the tight end position, we have Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers going on the road Thursday Night Football to play the Kansas City Chiefs, rostered in 28% of Yahoo Fantasy leagues. And with Gerald Everett, we saw this past week a 68% route participation and a 13% target share in week 1. Keenan Allen is expected to be ruled out with his hamstring injury. And with Everett, he dominated the Los Angeles Chargers tight end position in terms of routes and snaps, and now has an opportunity at a higher target share as long as Allen is out. He plays Kansas City. We expect a high-scoring, high octane game, pace of play, passing volume, you name it. This is the type of game that we want to target from the tight end position, especially from a touchdown upside standpoint. I wouldn't be shocked if Everett, 14.4 PPR points this past week, can continue on that impressive showing from last week, carrying over to this week against the Chiefs. Number 2 is going to be Hayden Hurst of the Cincinnati Bengals, going on the road to play my beloved Dallas Cowboys. He's only rostered in about 10% of Yahoo leagues, and he's a very extremely similar case to that of Gerald Everett. 79% route participation and a 15.1% target share in week 1. T. Higgins reportedly suffered a concussion and is expected to miss week 2 against Dallas. And with Hayden Hurst, we saw that he has a clear role in this offense, and as week 1 indicated, presents a good safety blanket for Joe Burrow as he was 3rd on the team in targets this past week. Want to quickly shout out Clouding Deions, who's been hyping him up all offseason, but it really looks like Hayden Hurst could be an integral part of the Cincinnati passing attack for the rest of the season. Number 3 is going to be Robert Tonyan, tight end of the Green Bay Packers, going to play the Chicago Bears, 24% ownership. And we saw this past week that Robert Tonyan looked solid, but he was low in terms of overall route participation. He commanded 5 targets, though, despite coming off that questionable designation following last season's torn ACL. And with Robert Tonyan, as we know with Green Bay, they lack much continuity in terms of having real trust with Aaron Rodgers. And with Robert Tonyan, he is one of the more familiar weapons for Aaron Rodgers. As we know, in 2020, an extremely efficient player who scored a ton of touchdowns. Maybe we could start to see that materialize down the stretch when Robert Tonyan has more of a materialized role in this offense. I think that his lack of usage in week 1 is more so indicative of his health status going into the game. We could potentially see that participation increase going to week 2 and beyond for Robert Tonyan. He's absolutely worth the flyer because we do expect this Packers offense to get back on track after a poor showing in week 1, and Robert Tonyan could be a big part of that bounce back for Aaron Rodgers and co. Going up to the top defenses you guys can stream this week. Number 1 is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals, again, going against my beloved Dallas Cowboys, 44% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy, and they're facing off against a Dallas offense that is coming off a pathetic week 1 performance and lost Dak Prescott going into this game. Cincinnati should be able to man up against that Cowboys weak ancillary receiving core and get pressure early and often up against Cooper Rush. I think that Cincinnati can make it ugly. I think it's going to be more so a lower scoring slugfest type of game, with Cincinnati potentially being able to take the ball away from Cooper Rush and get after him early and often, like I said. Number 2 defense going to be Cleveland Browns going up against the New York Jets, 28% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy. And we saw this past week, Cleveland showed it can get after the quarterback in week 1 with 4 sacks and take the ball away. They only had 1 total turnover, so 1 interception, but they also forced 4 fumbles despite not being able to recover a single one. Now they're facing off against a Flacco-led Jets offense that failed to score until the final minute against the Ravens and conceded 3 sacks and 2 turnovers. I expect this Cleveland pass rush to dominate all game and expect a ton of fantasy points if you are playing in a league that needs a defensive spot. The final defense I'm going to be starting this week is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the New England Patriots, only rostered in about 32% of Yahoo leagues. And we saw this past week, Steelers had by far the best defensive performance of the entire week 1 slate. Now they're facing a Patriots offense that failed to move the ball against the Dolphins. Yes, they lost TJ Watt, torn pec, expected out for the foreseeable future. But with the back end consistent guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick taking the ball away at will against Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense, I expect nothing less from them going up against Mac Jones and that Patriots offense. But either way, about 10 minutes. Want to keep it rapid fire for you guys as you're making your claims. Leave a like down below if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Currently on the road to about 15,000 subscribers. Just about 150 off if you guys are watching this. So help us reach that goal. And as always, comment down below your favorite streamer of the week. But either way, peace out. Good luck in your matchups. Let's get those dubs. Eat those dubs. See ya.